The tidal zones are a harsh and unforgiving environment along coastlines. They are home to a great diversity of marine plants and animals. This footage was captured at Bean Hollow State Beach in Pescadero, California. With the daily ebb and flow of the tides, the creatures here have had to adapt to an environment hammered by the ocean and scorched by the sun. During a high tide, the rocks in the tidal zone are battered by waves. Creatures that are unable to hang on to the rocks or find shelter will be swept away by the brutal flow. During a low tide, the sun scorches the rocks, and marine organisms that are exposed may dry out or become an easy snack for a predator. To survive under such harsh conditions, organisms in the tidal zone have some extraordinary adaptations, allowing them to cling to the rocks or to hide. Rock crabs and hermit crabs scuttle across the barren landscape at low tide, between the shelter of tide pools or cracks in the rock. They can survive the full 6-hour low tide without being in the water. Hermit crabs inhabit the shells of dead organisms, in this case, periwinkle snails. Rock crabs are one of the most common organisms in California tide pools. They survive by hiding in the shade of cracks or underneath rocks. Many types of mollusks inhabit the tidal zones, like mussels, limpets, periwinkles, and chitons. They attach themselves to rocks and feed during the high tide, and when the tide goes down, they lay dormant and wait for the next high tide. The sea anemone, a member of the Cnidarian family, opens up to feed on microscopic organisms during the high tide. When the tide recedes, they fold up and hold water to survive without the protection of tide pools. Small fish take shelter in the tide pools, like the tide pool sculpin, blenny, goby, and this baby monkey-faced eel. Once the tide ebbs, they are stuck in a single pool until the tide flows. Some organisms are frequent visitors to the tide pools, like the harbor seal, which enjoys sunbathing on the rocks and shelter from the waves. Seaweeds make up a critical part of the tide pool ecosystem and provides protection and food for some organisms. They also lead to the rocks being very slippery. Unfortunately, poaching, litter, and global warming threaten the tide pool ecosystem. Litter pollutes the tide pools and makes it difficult for native species to live there. Global warming has increased the temperature and acidity of oceans worldwide. Some species have had difficulty surviving this temperature increase, such as the sea urchin, and the increased acidity of the ocean harms shellfish, dissolving and weakening their shells. Poaching hurts rare species like the abalone, which are prized for their shells and meat. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation on the tidal zones and are better informed about dangers that threaten our closest opening to the marine environment.